Candace Valenzuela, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time. Why are you the better Democrat to take on Beth Van Duyne in the fall?
Jack, thank you so much for having me here today, or having me here virtually. I'm the best Democrat to take on Beth Van Duyne because I'm rooted in my community. I live here. I've lived here for years. I've served here. I've been elected to represent a fifth of this district already as a school board trustee. We work here. I've been raising my kids here for a long time, and I've delivered results. I've been able to help our families get the technology they need during a crisis. Our children have had access to Chromebooks, have had access to iPads in order to continue their instruction. When we did have regular school, we did have access to our fine arts academies, our STEM academies. Our career and technology education has been expanding, and we've been working hard at both equity in our curriculum and our instruction, been working really hard and making sure that communities, regardless of parents' incomes, have access to what they need. I understand uniquely the challenges that families are facing in this suburban, well-educated, majority person of color district, not just because this district looks like my family, but because I've served them before. I've been living here for years, and my opponent moved here a year ago.
Wanted to ask you, you're up and running with TV ads now, and you went after your opponent. And why is that?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say that this is an election about our experience. My experience is about, again, serving in this community. My experience is about living and loving in this community. And my experience is about the results of the things that I've done here. As I said, we've raised the rate of pay for teachers, raised the rate of pay for our food service members and our janitorial staff in my school district. I've been able to build a broad coalition of folks ranging from precinct chairs and local elected officials, statewide organizations like the Texas AFL-CIO, and incredible national organizations like Emily's List, the Congressional Black, Hispanic, Asian American, and Pacific Islander caucuses. These are the results of my experiences. Olson herself says that she managed a school district budget on the very front page of her website. It still says that. And if we're going to talk about that as being a part of the experience that leads us to being able to run for Congress, then we have to talk about the results of that experience too.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about is the fact that the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee has chosen to sit this race out. They're not endorsing either of you. What did you make of that?
I don't think it's the DCCC's responsibility to pick a winner or a loser in this race. We need to run with the coalitions that we've been able to build here locally, and I've been able to do just that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And their purpose is to win races in a general election setting, and I'm sure they'll be helpful later.
What is your message to voters in the primary runoff? A lot has changed, obviously, since you and I last had an in-depth conversation. So has your message changed because of the COVID pandemic and because the aftermath of the death of George Floyd?
My message hasn't changed, and it's just become a little bit louder in what we're talking about. We need to elect someone to Congress that understands the urgency of the issues that families are facing. My campaign has always been about families being able to put food on the table, to keep a roof over their heads, to see their children, their grandchildren, the community succeed because they have the education they need, that they have access to healthcare, and critical things like insulin, and now newly added, we're talking about COVID tests. And my campaign is about the equity in justice, to be able to walk outside your door and know that you're going to get equal protection and equal justice under the law. These things have not changed. But if you want to get a different kind of response from our federal government, if you want a new approach here, you need to elect a new kind of candidate. And when I win here, I'm going to be making history as the first person of color to represent this majority minority district, and I'm going to be the first Black Latina woman ever elected to United States Congress. But it isn't about these firsts. It's about making sure that when you send a representative to Congress, it's somebody from your community that is going to represent you, and I'm her.
And I wanted to ask you, as if you are elected, what do you think the proper response is from Congress now? If you were there already, what would you be fighting for as far as the federal response?
I would be fighting for relief for our families. I would be fighting for relief for our small businesses. I would be fighting for relief for our state and local governments, our institutions of higher learning, our universities, all of these things that are involved in the public trust. They've been left out to dry by large swaths of our federal government. And there is a core of folks that are fighting hard to make sure that people get the food they need, the testing they need, the protection they need in order to stay in their homes, or the protection they need in order to keep their businesses afloat. But even as we have had reopening in Texas, we're still seeing some of our most important small businesses dying. We're still aware of these budget crises on the horizon for many of our state and local governments. And we're not seeing enough urgency or relief coming from Congress, coming from the Senate. So that's exactly what I'd be fighting for right now.
You mentioned Texas. Do you think the state reopened too early?
We did open way too early. We barely closed before we started opening again. And we're seeing the consequences of acting so rashly. Our numbers are going up at a rapid clip, disproportionately affecting our communities of color. And we're going to be paying not just a real human toll. We're going to be paying a real human toll, but we're also going to be paying a real economic toll. Those things are not at odds with each other. When we protect our people, we protect the soul of our economy. And until we reconcile those two concepts in our mind, we're not going to get anywhere as a country or as a state.
Did you get a sense, though? I mean, we heard from business owners, they wanted to be able to reopen. They wanted to be able to, put food on their table. And I'm wondering, what kind of balance do you think has to be struck?
I think that we need to figure out where we are more likely to spread COVID, and we need to support those businesses for the time that they are not able to be open. And then we need to support businesses that can be open in a time like this one. Some of the innovations that I've seen coming from some of our small businesses, some of our restaurants, moving to curbside service and making sure that, they're wearing masks, they have the appropriate protection equipment. It's been fantastic seeing that innovation here. And I understand the need to support yourself and your family. Believe me, there have been more than a few times that I have worked multiple jobs in order to make it work. And I know that at a different point, I would probably be out there with the multiple jobs if it had been me in my 20s. So I get it. But we need to make sure that even our small business owners are around for a thriving economy post-COVID when we do have the vaccine, when we do have this under control. And so we need to balance those two things by ensuring that folks are safe while ensuring that we keep those businesses alive, if not thriving.
One of the things that we've seen Congress do is they have passed the CARES Act, and they're considering more. This is obviously costing trillions of dollars. And I'm wondering, how concerned are you about how we're paying for all this?
I think that we talk a lot about what we're losing in the short term and not about what we're gaining in the long term. We need to be investing in our people. We need to be investing in our small businesses. We need to be investing in keeping folks safe and well, because without them, there is no economy. If we lose some money in the short term, in the long term, if our businesses are able to open at full capacity after COVID, if our people are able to go back to school unscathed, if we avoid the associated healthcare costs with contracting COVID-19, even if you happen to survive it, you could leave the hospital with hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills. Our economy stands to suffer if we don't mitigate the circumstances that we're facing right now. So we need to be thinking about that long-term investment, and that means investing in folks in the short term.
As someone who has served on a school board, do you feel it's safe for students to go back to school in the fall?
It's something that I'm very concerned about as a mother of a 4-year-old, as a former school board trustee. It's something that I'm watching very, very closely. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't see strong direction coming from Mike Morath. I don't see strong direction coming from Governor Abbott. And when that happens, school boards are unable to act with the when that happens, school boards are not able to act with the necessary thought and planning that needs to happen. School districts have been throwing around ideas for a while on how to reopen safely. But if something comes out that contradicts that, they have to completely scrap that plan. That can cost, again, hundreds of thousands of dollars. We already know that our school districts are cash strapped. So with all of this stalling, with all of this foot dragging, I don't feel like it's safe for schools to reopen at this point. And that's terrible because our communities rely on our schools, our parents rely on our schools, our teachers would love to be back to work, but we shouldn't be risking the lives of our teachers, our faculty, our staff, and our babies because our governor doesn't want to work to protect them.
And one other question on education, and that is, as far as young children are concerned, elementary age children, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, how concerned are you that these kids at a very young age really need that in-person teaching, if you will, as where maybe a high school student, maybe a middle school student can be a little bit more adept working online, where that young elementary school student may not be, and it's not the best way for them to learn. How concerned are you about that?
We're all plunged into suboptimal conditions given the fact that we're dealing with a global pandemic. And I would be the very first proponent of high quality in-person early childhood education. This is the type of education that makes the biggest impact on our kids throughout their lifetimes. We've got studies showing this. We have studies showing that it has a high return on investment too. So I am sympathetic to the fact that we are losing precious hours. I've spent time talking with special needs teachers and talking about the fact that there have been these gains that were painstaking and incremental, these small victories that they've made with these students moving towards self-sufficiency that they lose every day, every week, every month that schools remain closed. But we can't make their development subservient or subordinate to their very lives. We need to protect the lives of our kids. We need to protect the lives of our teachers, everybody involved in that ecosystem in our education needs to be protected from COVID. And so I understand that this is urgent, but the only way to get to a point where we're adequately educating our kids is to do the right thing, shut everything down, get through this crisis, and then open as fast as possible. But if we try to prolong it through half measures, we're not going to be able to protect our children either.
Do you think that everything that has been reopened needs to be shut down, or just some?
Having restaurants open to do carry out, I think, is a good thing. Having retail stores doing curbside pickup, I think, is an incredible thing. And I think that we should continue to encourage that because our small businesses need that support. But talking about those places where there's high amounts of spread, movie theaters, talking about Unfortunately, hair salons, it's personally killing me not to go and see my hairdresser, but I also don't want to endanger the life of my hairdresser. I don't want to see that spread affect them. So some things, they can open without much difficulty. I think florists are some of the most safe folks in terms of this pandemic. But there are things that are just not going to do well right now.
One other COVID-related economy question, and then I want to move on, but that is, I know one thing that's going to be debated, I think, between the House and the Senate is the idea of whether or not to continue offering expanded federal unemployment benefits, that added $600 to whatever people get on their state unemployment, which I think that expires at the end of the month, July 31st. Where are you on that issue? Because some people say it should continue. Other people say there needs to be more of an incentive to get people back to work, because in some cases, people have decided it's not worth getting back to eat. It's not worth getting back to work if, in fact, they're making more money this way.
I think that's definitely the wrong way to look at it. I think a lot of people are afraid to go back to work because they fear for their very lives. This is an airborne illness that attacks. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to talk about the specifics of it, but this is an airborne illness that can get just about any of us. Many of us don't have access to childcare. Many of us have a lot of responsibilities at home that have been piled onto us because of this global pandemic. And if they want to encourage people to get back to work, we shouldn't be focused on punishing people into leaving their homes. We should be focused on curing COVID. We should be focused on protecting people. And that might involve expanding those unemployment benefits so people can stay inside.
I wanted to ask you about the aftermath of the George Floyd killing, and what police reforms do you support?
I support encouraging oversight so that when we do have to investigate police-related shootings, that you don't necessarily have to be dependent on the district attorney who has a daily working relationship with those police officers. I support encouraging folks to invest in better mental health, better education, better wage equity. When we're talking about police reform, we can't talk about it in a vacuum, right? Justice for these communities involves having a holistic approach. And that means that we address a lot of the things that put people at odds, that put us at odds with our criminal justice system. And those are some of the things that we need to be looking at.
There's been a lot of discussion about ending qualified immunity for police officers. Where are you on that?
I support ending qualified immunity for police officers. In order for us to protect our people, in order for us to protect our police officers, we need to make sure that folks have some transparency. Folks are able to build trust, and qualified immunity is not a trust builder for our community. It's not a trust builder for other police officers. It's very difficult to seek redress. It's very difficult to hold your fellow officer accountable if there's a different standard of accountability. So ending qualified immunity is a great path forward.
Do you have any concern that some police officers may decide, well, if there's no qualified immunity, I'm getting out? They would feel like they would have no protection.
I think that police officers, by and large, want to protect the community and want to protect themselves. And I think when we talk about police treatment and police compensation, we should be talking a lot less about giving them qualified immunity, a lot more about hiring from within the community, making sure that they have the training in order to engage with different situations, and making sure that they have the pay that addresses the jobs that they're expected to do. And I say jobs because police officers are burdened with a whole lot. and they're not getting the compensation that they deserve in a lot of cases. So making sure that they're getting a living wage in all of our communities is going to be another way to do it. I don't think qualified immunity is going to be the biggest protection for our police officers. I think protecting our police officers will be.
Then there's the notion that's also gotten a lot of discussion, and that's defund the police. And I think a lot of people I think there's a lot of different definitions of what that means. So when you hear defund police, what's your thought? Do you support that idea, oppose it, and what is your definition of it?
When I hear that phrase, I think there's a lot flying around it, and I'm running for a federal office. As a former school board trustee, I take big issue with folks trying to get their hands into a budget and try to control it when they're not necessarily directly accountable to what that budget does. So if communities want to choose to move funds around from one priority to another, that's going to be between them and their constituents. But what I will say is that we do need to be better investing in our communities in mental health services, in making sure that people have the wages that they need, and making sure that they have the education that they need. And we should probably focus a lot less on the heavy militarization of our police forces. You know, allowing our police forces to say buy tanks is not going to be the best way forward to engender community trust. But in terms of funding, that is something that needs to be handled by communities, by police oversight boards, by city elected officials.
President Trump has said that he believes in law and order, and wants to, and really wants to prevent looters and rioters, et cetera. And one of his major themes is law and order. So what do you say to that? Where are you on what his theme is?
I don't believe that President Trump believes in the rule of law. I don't believe that President Trump believes in order. He thrives in disorder. He is essentially a reality television president. Everything is a show for him, and the more sensational it is, the better. And it doesn't matter who has to die in order for that to happen. This is not a law and order president. This is a lawless, disorderly president who needs to be put out of office through the elections.
And how would you prevent the looting and the rioting that we saw?
I think we need to start focusing on what causes our communities to be in such a disarray, right? And so that means investing in our people, again, making sure that we have equitable wages, making sure that we have the education that we need, making sure that we're investing in our small businesses, making sure that folks feel safe. And that means everybody. Equal protection and equal justice under the law are things that we need to prioritize as a country. And until that happens, we're going to continue to see a lot of disorder, and that's the last thing I want.
Candace Valenzuela, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Nice to talk to you again, and stay healthy.
You too.
Thank you.